Ever feel like your self-esteem is on that roller coaster ride? You know, one day you're on top of the world, and next you're like, ugh, can't even look in the mirror.
It's so common.
It is. But the good news is you guys sent in a ton of sources on self-esteem, so we are diving deep today.
Yeah, let's unpack this.
Unpack it, figure out the why, but most importantly, give you guys some tools to actually build that lasting confidence.
And you know, it's interesting. Looking through these sources, it really seems like self-esteem, it's not like this fixed thing. It's not like your shoe size or something.
Okay.
It's more fluid, like the tide.
Okay, so it's going to go up and down.
Exactly.
Okay.
Ebbing and flowing based on, what we experience in life.
Okay, so if we're feeling the low tide right now, it's not like a life sentence.
Not at all.
Okay, good to know. But before we get to all the ways we can, boost it, let's define it, right? What actually is self-esteem?
Yeah, I like how the NHS article put it. They said it's the opinion we hold of ourselves, which is, when you think about it, it's so true.
It's not just our actual abilities, but it's our perception.
That lens we're looking through.
Yes. And then the Better Up piece brought up a good point. It's like we fall into this comparison trap.
All the time.
Which is human nature, right? But especially, I feel like now with social media,
Constant.
it's like everyone's highlight reel is right there.
Exactly. And then we compare, like you said, our behind the scenes to their highlight reel. And of course, we're not going to measure up.
No.
It's impossible.
It's setting us up for failure. And the Mind article, they had one specifically for younger people. And it was really interesting how they talked about the impact of that comparison on self-worth.
Especially for young people, that's when it's really forming that sense of self.
Yeah. And even for adults, right? Because I know the Mind article that was geared toward adults was saying those comparisons aren't even a lot of times based in reality.
Like this warped
It's warped.
perception of ourselves and others.
Totally. And it's not just comparing ourselves to others, right? We compare ourselves to our own expectations.
Oh, 100%.
I should be further along by now. Or we tie our self-worth to that promotion or, whatever it is. And it's our whole identity is riding on this one thing.
And that's a lot of pressure.
Way too much pressure. So it's internal, it's external. But why does this even matter? Why are we even talking about self-esteem? It's not just about feeling good, right? There's got to be more to it.
Well, right. The NHS article had a whole section about the effects of low self-esteem.
Yeah.
It could really impact your life. They talked about social withdrawal. You're afraid to put yourself out there. You're less likely to try new things.
You stay in your comfort zone.
Exactly.
Which, comfort zones are comfy.
They are comfy.
But sometimes they can be a little stifling.
That's the thing. It can be this vicious cycle. You're afraid to fail, so you don't try. And then that reinforces the belief that you can't do it.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
Totally. And what's worse, and both the NHS and the Mind articles talked about this,
Yeah.
is it can have a real impact on your mental health, like anxiety and depression.
Okay, so big consequences if our self-esteem is low. So then the question becomes, where does this all come from?
Right, what's at the root of it?
Yeah.
And a lot of it seems like, goes back to those early messages that we get, whether it's from family, teachers, or even just society in general. It's interesting. The NHS article is saying that negative feedback tends to stick with us more than the positive.
Oh, 100%.
Why is that?
It's so true. You can hear 100 compliments, but that one criticism, it's
It sticks.
tattooed on your brain.
Yeah. And it shapes how we see ourselves, how we think about ourselves, even if it's not accurate.
And the Better Up article, they use this phrase, tying self-worth to external validation.
Oh, interesting.
And when you really think about it, it makes so much sense, right? Instead of that, confidence coming from within, we've been conditioned to seek that approval from others to feel good about ourselves.
And that's such a dangerous game.
It is.
Because that external validation, it can be here one minute, gone the next.
Fleeting.
Yeah.
It can be gone like that. Okay, so childhood messaging, definitely a big one. But what about life events? Because those happen to all of us, and those can really, I feel shake our sense of self.
For sure. And a lot of these sources, like the NHS and the Better Up articles, they mention how things like, serious illness or grief or even job loss, those curveballs life throws at us. They make us question our abilities, what can we handle? And even our worth. Why is this happening to me?
Exactly. It just amplifies all those insecurities that might already be there.
Exactly.
And even personality. I'm curious about this because perfectionism on the surface seems like a good thing.
Right.
But it can really sabotage our self-esteem.
Totally. It's that impossible standard, always feeling like you're not quite good enough. No matter what you achieve, it's never enough. And you know what that made me think of? The Yale Ledger and the Better Up piece both talked about this, the importance of setting realistic goals.
Oh, huge.
Right. Because if you're always aiming for perfection and you inevitably fall short, it just reinforces that cycle of negativity.
Yes. Okay, so we've got childhood, we've got life events, we've got personality. I mean, it's a lot. But knowing this is only helpful if we can, like, actually do something about it, right?
Exactly.
So let's shift gears a little bit and get into the how. Like, what can we actually do to build this, like, unshakable self-esteem?
Well, the good news is all of these sources, they had a ton of strategies.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of overlap between them, which I always think is a good sign.
Yeah, like they're all onto something.
Exactly. And challenging negative thoughts was a big one. Like the NHS article even suggested writing those thoughts down and then actively countering them with evidence.
Oh, I love that.
Right. Put those negative thoughts on trial. And you know what goes really well with that? Focusing on our strengths. Several sources talked about this.
Which we all have them.
Yes, we all have them. The NHS said best, oh, we're all good at something.
Yeah.
So it's about identifying those strengths, the things that we enjoy doing, the things that make us feel good, and then, like the Very Well Mind article said, really leaning into those. Like not just acknowledging, oh yeah, I'm a good listener.
Right.
But actually actively using that strength.
So if you're a good listener, create opportunities to really listen, engage with that strength.
And it's amazing how when you start focusing on those things that you're good at, it naturally boosts your self-esteem.
Yeah.
And then you pair that with self-compassion, which...
And that can be tough, right?
It really can.
Especially when we're feeling down on ourselves, the self-criticism just comes out.
It's so easy to be so hard on ourselves. But like the NHS article, Very Well Mind and Better Up, they all talked about this. Like we have to treat ourselves with the same kindness that we would a friend.
It's true. Think about it. Because you would never, ever talk to your friend the way you talk to yourself sometimes. It's insane. Okay, so we're challenging those negative thoughts. We're focusing on our strengths. We're being kinder to ourselves. What about the people around us? Because a few of the sources talked about our environment, the people we surround ourselves with. Like, how does that play into this?
Well, it makes a huge difference. The NHS, for example, they talked about how crucial it is to have that support system, you know, cultivate those positive relationships.
Oh, yeah.
And on the flip side, try to limit exposure to negativity as much as possible.
Oh, 100%. I feel like everyone has that friend. Or maybe it's a family member, but you're like, I always feel amazing after hanging out with this person.
Yes, you leave feeling energized.
And then there's the opposite.
Yeah, where you're like, ooh, I need a nap.
I need like 3 days to recover.
An energy vampire.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not just the people, right?
True, yeah.
The Yale Ledger had a really good point about this, like curating your media diet. What are you taking in?
Oh, that's huge.
Huge in today's world. Because it's so easy to get caught up in like doom scrolling. Or just, like you said before, those comparisons online.
Yeah.
It's never ending.
Right. You're constantly bombarded with negativity, and it's like, how can you not internalize that?
Exactly. So being mindful, I think, is key here. What are we allowing into our space? Whether it's, like you said, the people we're spending time with, but also the information, the energy that we're letting in, online, offline. It all matters.
It's about creating that supportive environment for yourself, for your own well-being, which makes me think about self-care, because that was another big theme that came up. And honestly, it's something I need to be better at. It's so easy to let those things slide.
It really is, but it's so important. It's funny how self-care often gets, like, pushed aside as if it's this luxury or something.
Right, like it's selfish.
Yes. When really it's essential, especially for our self-esteem. A lot of the sources talked about this, like it's foundational.
Because when you actually think about it, taking care of your physical and mental health, you know, getting enough sleep, moving your body, eating well.
All of it.
It's like you're saying to yourself, hey, I'm worth it.
Exactly. It's sending that message to yourself that I am worthy of this care.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked a lot about self-esteem, but what about actual self-confidence?
Oh, good point.
Because I remember, like, the Mind Guide for Teens, it made this distinction, right?
Yes, they did.
It was like, self-confidence is about believing in your abilities, not just, you know, liking yourself in general.
Yeah, it's more about, like, I can do this.
Yeah, the I can do this feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do we build that?
Well, a few of the sources talked about the power of setting small, realistic goals. Like, remember how the Yale Ledger, they were talking about breaking down those bigger aspirations into smaller steps?
Yes.
It's like if you have this big, huge goal, it can feel overwhelming, right?
No, absolutely.
But if you break it down into bite-sized pieces, it feels much more manageable. And every time you check something off that list, you get that little boost.
Yeah, the momentum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I did that. I can do the next thing.
And then it's like, maybe I can do this other thing that I wasn't even sure I could do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where the growth mindset comes in, right?
Oh, yes.
Which luckily is something we can all cultivate. Like the Yale Ledger and Very Well Mind, they both talked about this, how it's that belief that our abilities aren't fixed.
Yes.
We can grow, we can learn, we can get better.
So it's not like, oh, I'm not good at this, so I'm just never going to be good at it. It's like, okay, I might not be great at this yet, but if I keep practicing, if I keep learning,
exactly,
I can get there.
It's all about the effort.
I love it.
And you know what helps with that? Stepping outside of those comfort zones.
Oh, because that's where the good stuff happens.
It's where the magic happens.
Oh.
Like Very Well Mind, they had this idea of approaching those scary things, those things that take us out of our comfort zone, almost like an experiment.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. So it's not like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a disaster. It's like, let's see what happens.
Let's see what I can do.
And even if it doesn't go perfectly, which, let's face it, most of the time it doesn't.
Right, because we're not perfect.
Exactly. It's not a reflection of our worth.
It's data.
It's data. We can learn from it, and we can grow from it. Oh. You know, this made me think of that quote from the Mind article. It was from one of the teenagers they interviewed. They were like, you can do anything, and you will always be capable of doing everything you want to do once you've really, really pushed through it. I love that.
It's so true. And I think that kind of ties into this other really important theme that emerged from a lot of these sources, and that's self-acceptance. It feels like we talk a lot about building self-esteem, right?
They do, yeah.
But, and a few of these sources kind of hinted at this, especially Better Up and Very Well Mind, they were saying that real confidence, like true confidence, might actually start with self-acceptance.
Ooh, interesting. I like that.
What do you think?
I think it's huge. Because it's like, instead of constantly trying to change ourselves or like fix ourselves, reach this like ideal that we have in our heads.
Become a totally different person.
Right. What if we just accepted ourselves for who we are, right here, right now, flaws and all?
Like we are enough as we are.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean that like all those strategies we talked about, they're not important. It's more about like the motivation behind them.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like imagine approaching those challenges, those opportunities for growth, not from this place of self-criticism, but from like, hey, I'm worthy of love and belonging just as I am.
Wow. Okay, that's powerful.
It changes everything, I think.
It does. It's like you're not chasing some perfect version of yourself. You're just showing up authentically, with kindness and curiosity.
Yeah.
I love that.
And honestly, that to me, that feels a lot more sustainable, a lot more fulfilling in the long run.
100%.
It allows us to like celebrate our strengths, embrace the things that, maybe we're still working on, but approach it all with a lot more self-acceptance and resilience.
Yes. And isn't that what we all want?
That's the dream.
I think so. So if you guys take away one thing, just one thing, from this whole deep dive into self-esteem, let it be this. You are worthy just as you are.
Yes.
And from that foundation, you can build a life that feels really authentic, really meaningful, and really true to you.
It's been awesome diving into this stuff with you.
Likewise.
Really great sources this week.
Yes. And to everyone listening, thank you for sending those in. Keep them coming. And until next time, we'll see you on the next deep dive.